Yep, we did it. I made it my mission to build a computer using all used components, and that's exactly what you're looking at here. So we've got a used CPU, used RAM, used motherboard, B stock power supply, and a used SSD. Now, to be more specific, these are all eBay parts with the exception of the case. And to be honest, it's extremely difficult to find used PC cases in my area, so I was searching Craigslist, couldn't really find anything suitable for this build, and eBay prices are a bit ridiculous when you take into account shipping because cases are very large, so you're often paying more than you would for just buying the case outright new. So I recycled an old case I had other plans for. I think it's a bit hideous if I'm being honest, but it's cheap and build friendly, so we'll use it here. And yeah, you could say I cheated on the case and power supply a bit, but what I'm really after in this video is stability. Obviously, if the parts work, we aren't gonna have any problem playing games, but how about temperatures versus, I don't know, a new version of this build? How's the dust buildup and especially the graphics card? How stable is a B-stock power supply? We'll discuss all of that and more in this video. Privacy.com is today's video sponsor, and right now they're giving out $5 credits to new accounts that sign up via the link below. So in a nutshell, Privacy allows you to purchase things online using virtual debit cards instead of real ones. It provides a necessary layer of security that keeps your real card and bank information hidden from the transaction using the same security standards as your bank. You can even download the browser extension and let it autofill the information for any of your cards on sites like Amazon. It's easy to use, more importantly, secure, and 100% free, thanks to the fact that they make money on the merchant side the same way credit agencies do, in case you were wondering how all that works. Click the link below and get started today. Now, how about a slow-mo build log? So this build actually has quite a bit going for it, and the first thing that probably stood out to you was the fact that this is a Zotac Amp Extreme 90 Ti in a $520-ish build. Believe it or not, this card was purchased on eBay for a little over 200 bucks. That's why this total build price is so cheap. I discussed that card, by the way, in this video right here. Packs a punch similar to a GTX 1070 while consuming just a bit more power, hence why we went with a 600-watt power supply instead of a 500-watt unit. And in all fairness, 500 watts still would have been fine, but under an intense gaming workload, we're pulling almost 300 watts from the wall, so our R5 1400 is actually keeping total consumption on the low side, even with an overclock to 4 gigahertz we're currently running. All in all, though, I think a 600 watt power supply is a better bet. It's the recommended unit, recommended wattage, and that's the one we went with. Now, I decided to turn the graphics card vertical in an effort to minimize card sag. This model 90 Ti sags a heck of a lot thanks to its lack of cooler reinforcement toward the rear I/O plate, and this kit from Cooler Master solves the problem. I would have used a cable mod kit instead. I actually prefer that one more, but I was a bit worried about clearance up front if we decided to throw fans near the front of the case as well. Only one fan is included with this case, and it's at the rear as an exhaust. So far, temps look okay. The system runs very quiet even when gaming. I gamed for like 3 hours in GTA 5, and it was doing just fine. Didn't get very loud at all, and temps were under 70C for the graphics card. I didn't manually overclock anything on the graphics card side, not that we really need to. And of course, the CPU running at 4 GHz is pretty sweet considering we're using the stock cooler in an effort to minimize cost. By the way, if you must know, this is the Thermaltake Versa in 24. I messaged Thermaltake just because I wanted something that was super cheap and frankly ugly. We're gonna do kind of a spoof video, and I still have plans to do that with my good friend Brian over at BPS Customs, so stay tuned for that. But this was one of the only cases that I still had in the garage that they hadn't built in yet, and I think it fit the bill. I mean, it's not a terrible looking case, but it's definitely not pretty, and that's one of the reasons why I figured we'd have fun with it. And again, on top of that, buying a used case on a site like eBay is not recommended because you're gonna probably end up paying as much to get the case shipped to you as you would just buying a new case from Amazon or Newegg. They have warehouses dedicated to, you know, housing big products, and they have contracts with UPS and FedEx and USPS, and that's how they're able to send this stuff on the cheap compared to just your average consumer who has to pay 30, 40, 50 bucks to ship just the case, nothing else in it, just the case within the continental US. So yeah, if you want to send it out of the state, forget it, hundreds of dollars. But anyway, case in point, the case is entirely subjective. As long as it fits the components you have on hand and has decent airflow properties, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. It's all preferential, and so we had a bit of fun with this one. Next up is our used motherboard. This is the MSI B350 PC Mate. For some reason, the previous owner had its barcode removed. But other than that, this thing was actually in pretty great shape. It almost looked brand new. AMD B series chipsets don't really have the best power management setups, and this one's really no exception, but VRM temp stayed in check, and I think that's thanks in large part to the fact that we're running a 1400 in here, not something like a 1700 or an 1800X or a 2700. Those chips would consume significantly more power, tax those VRMs, MOSFETs considerably more, and that would result in much higher temperatures overall, especially on board. But here, things are very much in check, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by how cool the CPU ran even with a 4 GHz all-core overclock. Speaking of the CPU, I really tried my best to find a great deal on a Ryzen 5 1600. I wanted a 6-core variant. It seems to be where games pretty much taper off with respect to how many cores, physical cores they'll utilize, but I really couldn't find them for anywhere less than about 20 bucks below retail, and I didn't feel it was right risking, you know, a CPU like that for a $20 discount. So instead I went with a Ryzen 5 1400, and I purchased it on eBay for about 80 bucks. Not a stellar deal by any means, but I wanted a modern platform, and this was the price I paid. Now, I'm sure you could probably do better if you were willing to hop back a few generations. I'm not trying to compete with you there. Everyone would probably build a used PC different if they had the money and the time to do so. But I wanted something that was relatively modern again. I just wanted Ryzen, frankly. I think Ryzen's a great value proposition, especially used. Can still game like a boss, and at the same time we have a few more cores, a few more threads at our disposal for things like content creation. You know, you can video edit with this thing. You could even stream with it if you wanted. It's not something you could do with more of the, I don't know, 3 or 4 generation back Intel CPUs. If you want to go like Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge, you'd have to go with an i7 if you really wanted to be comfortable video editing on a CPU like that. But here we get the same or similar package in a Ryzen 5 CPU for 80 bucks. I think that's a pretty good deal. Now on to the disappointment of this build. That's the DDR4. Look, I tried very hard to find a kit that ran at around 3 GHz, but people were asking unrealistic prices for them. That and DDR4 in general is still very expensive in most places, so I settled for a 16 gig kit of Micron modules with the absolute ugliest aesthetic you could possibly buy into. No heat sinks at all. This is bare green PCB here. They aren't even that fast at 2666 megahertz, meaning our Ryzen 5 1400 will struggle a bit, but I mean, hey, they can be picked up for as little as 70 bucks for 16 gigs. That's not bad at all. So if you're willing to bid on a few listings, you could get lucky. And a lot of these bare bones kits, by the way, are ripped out of like old Dell Optiplex and gaming desktops, so I wouldn't say they're unreliable. Micron's a reliable brand when it comes to memory modules, so I wouldn't freak out here buying used memory, although if you do buy a kit and it doesn't work out of the box, you can almost always count on the eBay buyer protection guarantee to allow you to get your money back. You can just tell the seller it doesn't work as advertised and that you want your money back. Now, the last two components of this build, I strongly recommend buying new, and we'll discuss why shortly. First off, the SSD. I didn't want a hard drive for a few reasons, but the biggest and probably most obvious was the fact that boot times are significantly slower on comparable hard drives. Ask anyone who went from an OS on a hard drive to an OS on an SSD, the difference is night and day. So I hunted eBay for anything in the 500 gig range that was fairly priced. I searched for old 840 EVOs, ADATA Toshiba drives, OCZs, and actually ended up settling on, believe it or not, an 860 EVO 500 gig SSD, which is the newest SKU in the EVO series. But here are the 3 reasons why I would advise purchasing a new drive versus a used one. I mean, firstly, the drives are selling for almost the same as new ones. So like my winning bid was only 10 bucks under a brand new unit. And I was pretty stubborn. I just wanted to just buy something and get it over with. I was taking forever to find a drive. So like some of these SSD kits are actually selling cheaper than I ended up paying for my used one. I think that's a little ridiculous. It really depends on where you look. But for the sake of this video, I had to buy something used. So I went with this one. The second reason why you want to avoid buying a used drive is that you have absolutely no idea how many times the drives were erased prior to reselling. So these SSDs have rewrite limits just like any other drive, and the more you erase and replace data, the more worn they become. This applies especially to older drives. It's not a super common thing for an SSD to fail randomly, but it's definitely more prevalent in older, previously used units. And if those reasons don't end up persuading you enough, the third reason is that you have absolutely no idea what was previously on those drives. In fact, data could still be on them when you receive them. Some people don't even know how to wipe a drive, so, you know, it's kind of luck of the draw there. Mine seemed to be cleared up when I installed Windows. There were no partitions. It was just one big empty volume, but there's really no telling until you open up deleted partitions and start checking things out. Again, it's kind of a risky thing to do. You don't know what's on the drive. Could be something very malicious, could be something illegal. So it's just luck of the draw. That's probably me with a tinfoil hat, but it's possible. Okay, it's possible. Now onto the power supply. This was actually a B stock EVGA unit. That's why it's not technically used, but it can't be listed as new either for a few reasons. So they may have been previously purchased and opened, therefore they're not new, or they could have manufacturer defects that required immediate attention. They could have been demo units used for in-house testing, etc. So there's really no guarantee that they weren't used, and that's why they're often just slapped with a B stock sticker and discounted pretty substantially. In the case of this power supply here, I paid about 15 bucks for it shipped, and that's not bad at all for a 600 watt unit from EVGA. I've used this exact unit before, not the exact unit I should say, I've used the exact model before, and it runs very quiet. It's a very reliable, cheap power supply, and it's actually, I think, 80 plus efficient, so it's not like, you know, some knockoff brand. I mean, it comes from EVGA and it comes with a decent warranty, so I would be perfectly comfortable buying this and putting it into a $700-800 build. So the viability of B stock units, in my opinion, really comes down to the credibility of the seller. This was shipped from EVGA direct via eBay listing, so I knew that if the unit didn't work, I could just email EVGA customer support fairly quick and have it resolved. But in this case, I was willing to risk that, right, in order to seize a great deal. Mom and pop shops, though, may not hold themselves to the same standards, so you'll want to be careful when buying other things with this label attached. In a nutshell, however, buying used power supplies is, well, it's pretty risky, but it's, I don't know, this is one of those touchy subjects. People tend to think differently about this, but a used power supply is used, right? How long was it run for? Was it run outside of its efficiency zone? Was it running extremely hot? How was airflow restricted? Remember, the power supply has the capacity to take out your entire system. It rarely happens, but it still does. So when you choose to buy used, you effectively bump your odds a bit since the lifespan of that unit is now shorter. Like, I mean, buying used in general is kind of a gamble, but I put this entire system together in this fashion to prove a few points. Firstly, it can be done, and for a lot cheaper than you think, but the two exceptions, power supplies and SSDs, are the two things that I wouldn't be willing to risk the integrity and stability of my system on those two, because for one, you could get most of them almost for the same price, brand new, and typically you have the new warranty to go with it. And for two, you can't really trust what people prior to you were doing with those units. So yeah, how risky do you want to play it? By the way, I put this entire system together for probably a lot cheaper than you think, about 500 USD, just a little over that. I think shipped it was about 520 or 530, so that's not bad at all for a system with a 980 Ti in it. I'm pushing excellent frame rates in pretty much all the games that I tested here in 1440p, which is something many systems in this price range cannot say about themselves. The build runs quiet, it runs much cooler than I thought it would. Everything appears to be stable at the moment. I'll let you know if any of that changes in the future, but with respect to the 90 Ti, let's say, I didn't have any issue with dust, right? When I first got the card, I opened it up, inspected it. Really no dust at all. I'm kind of surprised. I think the previous owner cleaned it before he boxed it up for me. And then the temperatures in the card are actually fairly low as well. Despite this being a beefy 980 Ti, it still gets pretty hot. It's got a decent manual overclock applied to it. And it didn't reach 70 degrees Celsius. So that tells me that either this card was not used for mining, which is probable, or that he replaced the thermal compound before he sent it to me. Maybe even both. I don't know. I don't know if he would have gone through that much trouble, but I'm comfortable where I put it this way. It wasn't dusty enough to where I felt like I had to take the whole thing apart and clean it, and the temperatures weren't high enough to where I felt like I had to take it apart and reapply thermal compound. So that's pretty good for especially an older card like this, to not have to really worry about much of that at all. Although I'm sure in the very near future I'll take it all apart anyway, just for peace of mind's sake, reapply the thermal compound and enjoy even lower temperatures. So to close, I'd like to first say that you could do this a number of ways, okay? I really don't care how you would have done this. I know people are just coming, well, I could build the same system, but it'd be much cheaper here, or I could build this system and it'd outperform your system for the same price. That's not the point. I'm not trying to say this is the best $530-ish build out there. I just wanted to buy a fully used system. I wanted all the components to be used on purpose, just to experiment. I mean, just to see. I mean, like, okay, if I throw this money out there, what are the odds that I get something that doesn't work? And I would have documented that, but I didn't. All the stuff worked. The sellers, for the most part, were reputable. I thought that they were reputable enough to be purchased from. And yeah, I have a system that works, and I only paid out of pocket a little over $500 for it. I really do think it's okay to take some risks here and there with respect to PC components. I mean, it's your money, spend it how you want, but that's how I see it. I see more value in the used market, I really do. But the two things I wouldn't risk used are the power supply and the storage drive. Again, everything else in my book is fair game. And the used market is pretty lit right now. Don't be afraid to bid here and there. Worst case, you come up with nothing, but best case, you come up with something that's cheaper than it was new. And if push comes to shove, you've got the eBay buyer protection guarantee. It's safer in that sense than Craigslist and provides a degree of peace of mind when shopping for used components online. What do you think about my build? What do you think about the video? Let me know by giving this one a thumbs up. I appreciate it. Or a thumbs down if you hate everything about life, or if you feel the complete opposite about the content you saw. Let me know in the comment section how you feel, and click that red subscribe button if you're feeling lucky. This is Science Studio. Thanks for building with us.